Hi, natural historians. I said that I wouldn't lecture to you on this PowerPoint via Zoom, but that I'd record it. So I got started a little bit on it and then I stopped, and now here's the recording. But before I do that, I'm your natural history lab instructor, and even though this is Zoom and I'm in my office, I want to show you some natural history. I can do it right outside my window. I want to show you something about redwood trees. Let's see. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. So I'm showing you the redwood tree that's outside my office, and you might notice through the dirty window that there's some brown leaves on the redwood tree. Are they dying? No. Well, actually, the leaves are dying. The tree is fine. This is late August, and it turns out that, redwood trees are conifers, and conifers, you think, have needles, which is kind of true. Most of them have needles or scales or something like that. They have leaves, they're just highly modified leaves. And they're not like deciduous. They are deciduous, actually. They do fall off. They don't last the lifetime of the plant. But different conifers shed their leaves at different times. And redwoods do it in a really interesting way. They don't shed the individual needles or leaves. Instead, they shed branchlets that looks like a couple years old. So every year the tree will grow these branchlets with a lot of leaves on them, and then keep them for a couple years, and then in late August they turn brown and shed the entire branchlet. And so this time of year you can sort of watch them slowly turning brown, and then in autumn, eventually we're going to get one of those storms coming through with high winds. And when it does that, boom, all these redwood branchlets come falling down, and the whole ground, the rows and everything, get covered with them, and they clog drains and stuff. So that's something you learn if you're paying attention to the natural history of your area. And here we are in Humboldt. This is our area, and you just learned something about the natural history of redwoods. So I'll charge you later, or you can pay me later. Actually, you're paying me now already. Okay, anyway, what am I talking about? There's something else I wanted to tell you, but I forgot what it was. Pay attention to the hurricane. Oh, I know what it was. So distracted. Let me get out of here and show you something on our Canvas page that I didn't talk about before. Yeah, okay, 303 lab. What class am I teaching? Okay, I didn't tell you this before, but if you go all the way to the bottom of our lab, there's this thing over here. And I don't think you'll find this in the other lab sections in 303, because I'm the only person who does this. It's a trick I learned in my other online classes. I have a Twitter account. I hate Twitter. It's stupid for most things. But I use it when I find cool news articles that I want to communicate to my students. I retweet the thing with this hashtag ESM303Murphy, and then all this stuff shows up over here. And it's news that I think you might be interested in. It's not anything that you will be tested on in the lab or the lecture of this class, but if you're interested in what's going on in the world, if you're curious about what I think is interesting for you, you'll look at it. Here's an article about, this is one of the, what is it? Let me look at it. A lot of times there are news articles that have to do with ecology, the environment, natural history. Oh, what? That's stupid. Is this gonna work? What? There's a problem with Twitter right now. That's totally stupid. No way. That's weird. Anyway, hopefully it should work for you. Come in here and look for the URL. Click on the URL and it should lead you to something. I'm going to give it one more try. Looks like my internet's down or something. No, it's not working. Anyway, I think it's cool. Check it out. All right, we'll get on track here and do this thing here. Okay, so I already talked to you about the field notebook, and we already did this stuff, and we came down to here. And it's just, I'm not going to go through all this, A, because you've had it before, B, you don't need me to talk very much about this. You can review it for yourself and learn it for yourself. But basically, taxonomy is a system for naming things. Taxonomy and systematics are two things that are largely overlapping. You would think that the arrangement of different domains and the kingdoms within them reflect some sort of evolutionary lineage if you believe in evolution, which I do, and most biologists, almost all biologists do. But not everybody believes in evolution. But anyway, the evolutionists would like their taxonomy to reflect the evolutionary relationship so that all members of a genus have a single common ancestor. It's not actually true. Taxonomy, you can have a taxonomy of box shapes or packaging shapes from the grocery store that has nothing to do with evolution. And it turns out that some of the groupings, the taxonomic groupings that we use, are faulty from an evolutionary point of view, and usually they get cleaned up. But anyway, we need words to talk about things, and so we arrange them into groups and we apply words to those groups. So for instance, there's 3 domains. We need a word to refer to each domain. One is eukarya. We are in that group, and you should know what that means. It means we have nuclei in our cells. We're multicellular organisms with nuclei and other organelles, whereas the other 2 domains do not. Archaea and eubacteria, I think. Okay, so so it goes domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And I think that you should probably memorize this list of hierarchies. What I do to remember is I have a mnemonic from the first letter. I just know domain, but I go K, P, C, O, F, G, S. And mnemonic is a memory trick. And so from lessons I've learned from competitors in memorization is what they do is one trick that helps them remember things is to tie together a bunch of highly profane words. So that's what I've done, and I'm not going to tell you what I have with my KPCOFGS, but I'll let you come up with your own. But yes, you should, so you know that it goes kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. In this class, in environmental methods, we're going to be talking mostly about the genus and species level because you'll be learning a lot of genera and their species, sometimes families, and that will be looking at plants and mammals and birds and some invertebrates, so different animals. So different animals is the things we're going to be looking at. Okay, that's all I want to say about taxonomy. Because I don't know, people just like looking at animals because we're animals. We don't look at well, I guess we look at plants some. We certainly don't look at protists very much because they're microscopic. But anyway, just here are some groups of animals, and we want you to recall. I don't know if you remember this organization. This is a systematic organization, I think, of animals. Do you remember all these major, gosh, what are these? Classes, I think? Are these classes? Or phyla? Let's see. We would probably be in phyla of animals. Most of them you never see. They're marine, the porifera, the sponges, cnidarias, the jellyfish and corals. The ctenophores, I don't know what a ctenophore is, or I don't know what an ectoprocton is, or a brachiopod. I should, because I'm a biologist. Sea urchins and starfish, sea stars. And then the chordates. So wait, chordates is sort of like something with a backbone. Vertebrates are chordates. There's some other things that are chordates. But if you think of all the animals you know, you're probably thinking of, I don't know, zebras and elephants and cats and dogs and humans. But that's only one really small group of animals. There's a ton of other animals. There's also platyhelminthes and rotifera and mollusca and annelida and arthropoda and nematodes. And we don't think about them hardly, but I want you to think about them. I want you to be thinking particularly about arthropods because look at the diversity of animals. Each little dot here is given according to the number of species. Each dot is sized to the number of species known or estimated. Known is in the darker blue gray, and then estimated is in the lighter color. So there's not a lot of mammals in the world, people, not a lot of mammal diversity. There's not a lot of bird diversity. Diversity starts getting big when you look at fish, crustaceans, mollusks, ow, gross, spiders, yuck, spiders and ticks and Scorpions. And then insects. Insects are enormous. There's a lot of insects in the world, and there's a lot that have been undiscovered, a lot of estimated. Okay, so this is, maybe you're aware of this, but anthropocentrism is, it's something that probably we all do, especially if you're not a scientist, especially if you're not a natural historian. We think that humans are the center of the universe, and things that are like us are the most important things. So monkeys and dogs and cats and cuddly furry things, those are the important things. Birds are kind of weird, and certainly not squishy insects or worms. But if you look at the diversity of life from just a numbers perspective, we are totally insignificant compared, at least in diversity, compared to all these other groups. So just have some appreciation for that, okay, guys? Now let's talk about plants. Plants. You should have taken Botany 150 before taking this class or a similar class, and you should already know this. You should know the different groups of plants. When you think of plants, you think of carrots and lettuce and maybe maple trees, I don't know, and you're probably thinking of a flowering plant, but there's this huge diversity of non-flowering plants that is out there. Well, not, I don't know if most. Flowering plants are highly diverse, but there's a lot of plants out there that don't have flowers. All these gymnosperms, like this redwood tree out here, ferns and mosses and their relatives, the liverworts and club mosses, and also other things. So almost 500,000 species of plants in the world. Many of them flower, many of them don't. This is a useful what's it called? Cladogram? Not a cladogram. Taxonomy. Phylogeny. This is kind of a cladogram because these are evolutionary relationships that show the unique adaptations that separate downstream groups from upstream groups from downstream groups. Okay. Anyway. Yeah, you should know these guys. Okay. I guess we're going to remind you a little bit more. There's the non-vascular ones without tracheids and xylem and phloem, and with no seeds, and those are the bryophytes. An early evolution of plants was vascular tissue, and maybe a little bit of lignin, maybe not, but still seedless. The ferns and their allies. By the way, their allies are really cool. Then there's the naked seeded things. What does that mean? No endosperm or something like that? I should know. And those are gymnosperms, seeds in a box, naked seeds and seeds in a box. So the seeds that have a fruit around them are the angiosperms. Okay, remember your Botany 150. Remember it better than I do. What does this mean, a covered seed? How is an angiosperm separate from a gymnosperm? That's a good review question. If you tell me in our Zoom session, I'll give you a special prize. I have special prizes I award, even when classes are online. Okay, I want to go through plant parts in some detail here because when you're doing your independent observations and you look at plants, man, use your education in this. You took Botany 150, you should know this stuff. So when you make a drawing, you should be able to draw and label the different plant parts. So make sure you use the right words. So I'm going to talk about all these things: plant structure, growth habits, their stems modifications, their leaves modifications, and inflorescences. Okay, so plant growth. You got your herbaceous plants, you got your woody plants. Basically it's basically whether they have secondary growth or not. Secondary growth gives secondary xylem. Secondary xylem is woody. It's got really thick secondary cell walls with lignin, and mostly lignin and cellulose in them. So if they don't have that, they're herbaceous. And how do you tell them apart? Well, if you can just crush it all up like lettuce, it's herbaceous, and if you can start a fire with it, that's not a good example. If it's woody, it's woody, which is a separate sort of a morphological feature than this next trio, which is annual, biennial, and perennial. Annual means the seed germinates in spring and it's dead by winter. It lasts for 1 year and the plant is dead. Biennial means it takes 2 years for it to it it may live for many years. I was going to say it's eternal, but even I don't know if any of the I don't think that's a good term for any organism, including plants, eternal. Even the oldest trees in the world eventually die. But anyway, they're not annual or biennial. The third group is basically just a size classification: tree, shrub, and herb. There's no real definition. Herbs are small, trees are tall, shrubs are halfway between herbs and trees. So marijuana, cannabis, herb is an herb, and carrot is an herb, and dandelions are herbs, and grasses are herbs. Shrubs, any bushy plants you can think of. Oh, how about evergreen huckleberry? That's very shrub-like. It doesn't really grow like a tree. Sometimes, sort of, but mostly it's small and low to the ground. And then tree, it's got a trunk, and it's perennial. It's got woody tissue. Shrubs also have woody tissues, but shrubs are intermediate between trees and herbs. Okay. Anyway, so hey, in your independent observation, you got a book. You say there is a shrub in my area that has stems like this and leaves like this and inflorescence composed of flowers like this, etc. So identify it as something like that. Use the word. Herbaceous versus woody. I'm not going to go through this. You can look at it on your own. I love woody growth, but this is not Botany 105, so I'm not going to refer to this. But I do know that students really struggle to learn secondary growth. But once you understand it, it's the coolest thing, especially when you understand vascular cambium, the importance of vascular cambium, and how all the phloem is just what bark is. It's just really narrow, and then what primary and secondary xylem is, and heartwood and sapwood. It's very cool. It's very, very, very cool. I would say trees are so smart to have evolved this. Biologists would not like it if I said that, but I like to say that. Annual, biennial, perennial. Well, you can read it. It's just what I said. Okay, but I did want to say I think biennials are really cool. I think I mentioned this to you about carrots. I talked about carrots before. Carrots are a good example of a biennial. Okay, tree, shrub, herb, trees, yeah, shrub. Shrub is smaller perennial woody plant with multiple basal stems. I know trees that have multiple basal stems, but they're bigger, they're not smaller. Okay, whatever. And then the herb does this. Boy, you can don't get tricked into thinking that all herbs are annual. Not true. Think of grasses. All grasses are herbaceous. They don't have any woody growth, but some are annual grasses like cheatgrass, an invasive species in the Great Basin in California. Cheatgrass grows from a seed and it finishes its life cycle in less than a year. But there are many perennial grasses as well, and what they do is their above ground plant parts might only last for a year and die back over winter, but the root stays alive and the apical meristem stays alive, and then it resprouts from a crown, I guess, to make more leaves the next year, and you can have perennial grasses. In fact, there's a great diversity of native perennial grasses in California. That blew my mind when I first heard it. I thought all grasses were just, they screw and they die, but no, they're actually highly diverse, both in species and in habit. Oh boy, woody plants are herbaceous, and then they have different growth forms: vines, forbs, grasses, aquatic plant. I think I'm going to look at some of these, maybe not. Let's look at plant parts. So stems. This whole picture here is got node, internode, and leaf, and apical meristem. Well, you get at the node, you have an apical meristem and a leaf, and the stem coming together. But all these like colors together, it's a plant unit which has a name, which I should remember, but I've forgotten. And you will get a special prize if you remind me in a Zoom session of what it's called. It ends in an EME. But anyway, it's a plant growth unit that has an internode, a node, and a leaf. Internode, node, leaf. And all plants, that's how all plants grow. All of them. They all have this exact same form in their end parts. And they vary in the length of this node. They vary in the shape of the leaf. But from cactus to redwood tree, they all have the same form. And so it blows my mind how you can take a simple unit like this and get so many complicated structures. I think that fractalism is operating here. There's a mathematical basis to plant growth, which must be encoded in their DNA, which blows my mind. But it's a good way to look at plants when you hold one in your hand. Think of that plant unit. Where is the plant unit here, and how is this one special? Okay. Some modifications of stem worth thinking about. Stolons, a very common plant in the dunes here, is a strawberry. There's a strawberry that grows in the dunes, and it has a modified horizontal stem which goes out and it's able to, from a node, set down roots and shoots, and that can put out another stolon as well. And so this is a way of clonal propagation that this plant has. It enables it to colonize neighboring plants without undergoing sexual reproduction. Stolons are cool. Tubers are also cool. I think potatoes are tubers. They are stems modified for starch storage. And potatoes do grow underground, but morphologically, they're part of the stem, not the root. Yeah, here's an example. When you grow a potato, it puts out a stem that grows up, and then you bury that. And a node, an apical meristem from a stem of a potato that's buried will put out tubers. But you have to bury it. It's a trick to growing potatoes. Okay, a rhizome is an underground horizontal stem. And I guess ginger is an example. I guess this is lily or a ginger is a stem that is like a tuber, starch storage unit, but it just grows horizontally. Okay, how's that different from a tuber? I'm not exactly sure. A corm, I believe, is actually new corms form from axillary buds on top of an old corm. I'm trying to distinguish these different modified stems, tuber, rhizome, and corm, and I'm not going to do that while I'm on film here, so maybe I'll do some separate research and publish it. Yeah, one of these, I think one of these might be actually modified leaves, like an onion. Is an onion any of these? It's not a stem, so it's not. I'm not sure. I'll clarify for you guys and make it clear some other way. Sorry. A tendril is a modified stem for grasping, which is kind of cool. So this looks like a grape, and it's got at a node, it will have an apical meristem, which instead of growing out your usual stem that puts out new leaves, it puts out graspers. It's kind of cool. Okay. Some more, just looking some more stem modifications. This guy looks like he doesn't have a stem, or this one, or this one, or this one, but they do. They all have a stem. It's just that this stem is very compacted, almost to the microscopic level. And so there's the stem is microscopically long, and then there's a new leaf that comes out. So they can put out a lot of leaves in a very short area. It's the exact same structure. It's just modified to give you what you get. It's pretty cool. Yucca is not native to right here in Arcata, although we'll have them growing here. There's some grasses, I think, like Brazil grasses, that looks a lot like a yucca. Drosera is it's a bog plant. You have to go to a bog to find them. They grow around here. They're sundews. They're really cool plants. The multiple leaves coming out of a dandelion are all coming from a very shortened stem. And even in this drawing, it's not really clear where those nodes are because they're so small. Okay, now we're going to talk about some leaves, leaf modifications, your basic leaf. This is a simple leaf because it doesn't have multiple leaflets. It's simple. It has parts. It's got a tip. The whole thing is called a blade. It has a margin. The margin may be smooth or maybe wavy or might be lobed or it might be toothed. It's got venation to it. The venation is sometimes very important in an identification. It's got a base here, the leaf base. and then at the base of the leaf is a bud. You'll always find in between a leaf stem and the branch, I'm sorry, between the stem and the leaf, you'll always find a bud. There's a little bit of apical meristem in there, so that's pretty cool. Oh yeah, petiole. Sorry, the base. What was I talking about? I guess leaf has a tip and a base, and then it's attached to the stem by a petiole or the leaf stalk. Sometimes there'll be a few other guys there called stipules. I don't really talk about them much, but if you see them, you can mention them. Okay, leaf blade, petiole, and bud and stem. Excuse me. There's so much leaf morphology. The main thing to know is that your leaf can be simple or compound is how I start. This is simple, this is simple, this is simple. This is deeply lobed, if not compound. But these are definitely compound, and this is doubly compound, and this is compound, compound, and compound. The difference between a simple and a compound leaf is that a compound leaf has leaflets. And how do you know the difference between a leaflet and a leaf? Could it be, what's the difference between this guy and this guy? The difference is that at the base of the petiole of a leaf, you'll find an axial bud. So at the base of a leaflet, you won't find that. You have to go all the way to the bottom of the true leaf to find that axial bud. So that's a good trick, and sometimes you'll use that when you're wondering, what is this? Is this a stem with alternate leaves, or is this all one leaf with leaflets, and that the axial bud will be down here? Compound leaves come in two flavors. They come in pinnate, pinnate like pinna from a feather. I guess these are more feather-like, they were thought. And so when you have pinnate leaves, they're just opposite each other with one long rachis, an extension of the petiole. Or they're palmate, like your fingers, where all the leaflets come to a single point here. So maple trees are deeply lobed. That's not a good example. Chestnut, if you know chestnut trees, they are palmately compound, whereas walnut trees are pinnately compound. There's a wonderful walnut a block away from the co-op. It's on J Street and 10th. 10th and J Street is a wonderful walnut tree. If you run down the right now, you can see pinnately compound leaves. But there's many others as well. Sometimes plants just go really wild. They go pinnate twice compound. So there's the bud, so we know this whole thing is a leaf. This is one leaflet, and then it's got side leaflets right there, which is pretty cool. More leaf modifications, they also can have tendrils. These are peas. I guess the tendrils on peas are, well, they're leaves. They're extensions. This is one leaf. Take my word for it. At the end of it is a tendril, which is a modification of a leaflet. You can have leaves, bulb storage, so like onions, I'm pretty sure. Yes, okay. Onions are modified leaves. It's just the stem is hardly there at all, but it's put off a gazillion leaves, and each is fleshy and stores starch. Spines are leaves. So yeah, be careful here, because this cactus might have a thorn, which is a modified stem, and then spines, which are modified leaves. And sometimes they're modified for insectivory, which is pretty cool. Drosera is one of our local plants, and it has these leaf hairs that have sticky tips to them, and they live in nutrient poor areas, and they supplement their diet by eating insects. So this is a vegetable that's a carnivore. That's interesting. Okay, by the way, this is Drosera, and you can acquire these. You can buy them or get clones from a friend. And I have several of these growing in my kitchen because they're insectivores, and I also have a compost bucket that attracts fruit flies. And if you don't have something to get the fruit flies out and keep compost, you tend to get a lot of fruit flies in your kitchen. And when I started growing these guys, they basically completely destroyed solved my fruit fly problem. So they do require a fairly sunny window, a bright window, and they require their feet to be wet all the time, but they're wonderful plants, simple to grow, and they do me a favor in my kitchen and maybe yours someday. Drosera, honeydew plants. Lastly, the most complicated part are inflorescences. So an So here's a review of the flower. I'm not going to go through all these flower parts for you, but I expect you to know them. So if I mention the stigma, style, and ovary, you should not be confused. You should remember what they are. Okay, the difference between an angiosperm and a gymnosperm is that the ovules are born inside an ovary in an angiosperm, and I think there is no ovary in a gymnosperm, so the ovules are naked on the, what is that called, the scale of conifer, strobilus, I think. How'd I do, botany people? It's been a while. Okay, and then the wall of the ovary becomes a fruit. So that also distinguishes angiosperms from conifers, is that angiosperms have fruits and conifers do not. Okay, this is a simple flower, but man, you know they get more complicated than that. Often a plant will produce a specialized stem with a lot of flowers on them, and that whole thing is called an inflorescence. So a specialized stem with a lot of flowers on it is an inflorescence. It's not a flower. You might think a sunflower is a flower, but a sunflower is not a flower. It's an inflorescence containing hundreds or thousands of flowers on it. I am not going to go over all these different kinds for you. I'm not going to expect you to know them all, but if I do use a term such as umbellate, I may not define it for you, and I'll expect you to look it up and be able to figure out what it means. But if you have a weird inflorescence that shows up in your independent observation, then go ahead and try to define what kind of an inflorescence it is, and we will be duly impressed. And if you don't, we'll be duly unimpressed. Here's some just examples. They're so pretty. I like these guys here. They unwrap like a fern, like Saracenate vernation, Phacelia. I think many of these are Phacelias. Here's some cool things. What is that? Mountain rocket flower or something like that. Can't remember. Sunflowers and inflorescence. Oh boy. This is, I think, elderberry, I think. I don't know what this one is. This is probably silk tassel. These are all of our native flowers, I think. Cool. Okay, that's all I wanted to say, guys. Quick review, man, but I hope it sort of cleaned out some of your cobwebs. Okay, so use that as a reference and the PowerPoint as a reference as you do your independent observations and as we refer to plants this semester. Okay, peace out.